Okay, let's get started on today's webinar. Welcome everyone. We are very pleased, Parachute's very pleased to present along with our colleagues at the Injury Prevention Center this webinar that is focused on surveillance to action, Canada's response to emerging poison issues during COVID-19. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if all of the participants will note the question and answer, the Q&A box at the bottom, please log any questions that you have that you would like the speakers to address at the end of the session. There'll be time for question and answer there. If you can log your questions in there, that would be great instead of the chat box. We'll leave that for just exchange of comments. And if you have any challenges with technology, we'll be watching that as well. And at the end of the session, there will be an evaluation screen that pops up. So don't disappear on us right away. We'd love to hear your feedback on the webinar itself so that we can make future webinars even better. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Margaret Thompson, who's the Medical Director at the Ontario Poison Centre and the President of the Canadian Association of Poison Control Centres, to give a few opening remarks, and then I will introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Pam. As the President of the Canadian Association of Poison Control Centres, I represent the 5 poison centres across Canada, serving 8 provinces and 3 territories, and the specialists and toxicologists who provide care at these centres. Poisonings have been a target prevention topic for Parachute since its inception, and we at Poison Centres thank Parachute for the ongoing relationship in our efforts to prevent exposures. Poison centres are provincially operated with funding coming from a number of sources in different provinces. Our first mandate is to provide care to those who have been or might have been exposed to some chemical or toxin. With approximately 300,000 calls per year managed by these poison centres, approximately 70% of these calls coming from the public, we have a wealth of information about hazards to Canadians. As the specialists at our poison centres offer home management for the majority of these calls, these are exposures that are not reportable and about which there is no other interaction with the healthcare system in Canada. Until the Canadian Association and individual poison centres began working with Health Canada, the Surveillance and Coordination Unit in Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division, there was no interest in these hazards to Canadians, and there was nowhere for poison centres to report their concerns. Starting in March of 2020, after the declaration of public health emergency and the jurisdictional lockdowns because of COVID-19, poison centre specialists started to see an increasing exposures to cleaning products as these became much more visible in households, and the inappropriate use of and combination of cleaning products in efforts to reduce virus transmissions within households. Because of our partnership with Health Canada, we now had a venue to escalate our concerns about products that were causing harm. I'm going to leave it at that. The rest of this webinar will address the response of Health Canada to these notifications in an effort to keep Canadians safe in partnership with Parachute and Poison Centres. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I am going to now introduce our fabulous lineup of presenters from Health Canada. And I will give you their names and titles, and we have provided an outline of their bios to all of the participants separately. So our first presentation, Richard Wooten, who is the Team Leader, Surveillance and Coordination Unit at Health Canada, Dr. Abdul Yassin, Epidemiologist at the Surveillance and Coordination Unit, and along with that, with her colleagues, Dr. Deborah Weiss is an epidemiologist at the Surveillance and Coordination Unit. In presentation number 2, you're going to hear from James Hardy, who's the manager of the Triage and Surveillance Division within Health Canada's Consumer Product Safety Program. In presentation 3, you're going to hear from Mary Morgan, the Director of Health Product Compliance and Risk Management Division within the Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch at Health Canada. Tufik Zayun, Manager of the Health Products Compliance and Enforcement Unit, again within the Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch, and Bobby Chu, Regional Manager, Health Product Compliance, Central Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch. Presentation 4, you will hear from Sean Lawless, the Manager of Health Products and Food Branch, Health Canada. I will then come back along with my colleague Patty Stark from the Injury Prevention Center, and we will give you the final presentation before we open it up to questions and answers. So right now I am going to turn it over to our first group of presenters, and I will be back at the end of this session. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you so much. Just a huge thank you to Parachute for coordinating this Poison and Evidence series webinar, as well as to the Canadian Poison Centers, the Injury Prevention Centers, our provincial and territorial counterparts, and all those that contribute to Toxicovigilance Canada in any shape or form. So I'm just going to confirm that my screen is being shared and that everyone can see this.
Yes, Richard, it's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. First, just a little bit about Health Canada, who we are, what we do. Essentially, Health Canada is the federal department that is responsible for helping the people of Canada, sort of maintain and improve their health. One of our primary responsibilities is as a regulator. Sort of what goes into that is the, sort of evaluating, improving products, setting up requirements and providing guidance, working with partners and monitoring safety, enforcing compliance, and communicating about health risks. And you can see on this slide a number of sort of the acts that lay out our responsibilities as a regulator. I myself do not actually work in a regulatory program. I work more in the sort of emergency management and coordination role, in the sort of partner role, and supporting sort of horizontal leadership. And it really is important to highlight that in Canada, the majority of health jurisdiction is held at the provincial and territorial level. Hence so much of the importance of that, sort of pan-Canadian collaboration and partnership, and sort of a federal horizontal role in coordinating some of those activities. The department is also, has an important role with information providing based on the science and research that is conducted by the department, a funding role via the Canada Health Transfer, as well as many other vehicles for grants and contributions, as well as in some prescribed circumstances, the provision of supplementary healthcare services. So on this slide, really, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Health Canada is part of the federal health portfolio that reports to the same minister and works very closely with the Public Health Agency of Canada, the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Sort of on this slide, you can see a rapid overview of some of the key Health Canada programs involved in our toxicovigilance network. I should point out this is not a comprehensive org structure. It was just used to sort of highlight some of our key areas involved in toxicovigilance. And today we have speakers coming from the Regulatory Operations Enforcement Branch, from Healthy Environments and Consumer Safety Branch, as well as the Health Products and Food Branch. Taking up a disproportionately large section of the slide, you see the orange section, which refers to the Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division, which is comprised of 2 units that work very, very closely together. So first, I'll speak about the Chemical Emergency Preparedness and Response Unit, which is responsible for the coordination of health portfolio response to a chemical emergency. So in the event of a chemical emergency, support that we can provide comes from medical countermeasures and resources from the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile, analytical laboratory support, as well as scientific advice in the support of risk assessment. And I really do need to highlight that this support that would be coordinated would come from over 20 health portfolio programs. So it's a massive sort of coordination role, which sets us up very nicely with respect to the work of the surveillance and coordination unit, due to our relationship doing coordination across the health portfolio, but also doing that work in service and support of our provinces and territories. We're well positioned to provide that coordination role. So in 2018, the Surveillance and Coordination Unit was established to implement the Canadian Surveillance System for Poison Information in collaboration with our poison centers and our provincial and territorial counterparts. CSPI is currently in year 3 of a 4-year implementation plan, which will result in the ability to aggregate, analyze, and interpret poison center data. Roughly half of our resources are epidemiologists embedded within the poison centers, and we are here to support regional and national surveillance activities. As a division, we're committed to toxicovigilance, fostering information exchange and collaboration between our partners from the local level all the way to the international level. And I've already used this word toxicovigilance a number of times. I think it's only fair that, sort of share a bit of a definition of what is it that we're talking about. And this is from the recently published WHO, World Health Organization guidelines for establishing a poison center. And essentially what they're saying in this publication is toxicovigilance comprises of the detection and management of toxic exposure events of public health concern. It involves the collaboration among poison centers, toxicology laboratories, public health agencies, health authorities, regulatory agencies, health security agencies, and others. And those others, we could highlight the NGOs, the injury prevention centers, academia, industry, law enforcement, border services. This is a lengthy list. The aim of Toxicovigilance Network is to provide information for timely poison prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and management of risks associated with toxic exposure events of public concern. This is achieved by building relationship amongst the toxicovigilance partners for information exchange and collaboration and identifying and bridging gaps. And really important to highlight in Canada, these roles and responsibilities to address toxic risks are scattered across several jurisdictions and agencies, spanning jurisdictions. So, it really is important to make those linkages so that we're all playing on the same team and working together to the best of our ability. In 2018, the Toxicovigilance Network was formed, building off of the Poison Center Community of Practice to foster collaboration and inform, exchange of information to inform poison prevention, treatment, harm reduction, public health, regulatory, health security, and public safety actions. Today, this network has over 430 members, and it is hosted on the Canadian Network for Public Health Intelligence. And you can see on the screen sort of a breakdown of the membership, but it is pan-Canadian, involving international counterparts, spanning sort of many disciplines and jurisdictions. The network components are comprised of the Canadian Surveillance System for Poison Information, a toxicology laboratory response network. So this is a network of over 25 clinical and forensic laboratories, an early warning system and reach back support mechanism, a developing antidote registry of where sort of the chemical antidotes are located across the country. And last and certainly not least is the public outreach and communications working group, which is comprised of all of the provincial injury prevention centers, many of the Health Canada programs, provincial and territorial counterparts, as well as poison centers. And the idea here is to identify what are some of those communication priorities and facilitating collaboration on developing common messaging and disseminating the message so that it can get to that target audience to have the impact that we want it to have. And before I turn it over to my colleagues to zoom into the CSPI piece, I'll just speak about broadly the goals of Toxicovigilance Canada. Partnerships and collaboration is our bread and butter. This is what we're trying to promote. Health Canada is, sort of not the, the sole source. We're in a pan-Canadian community, and the whole is, far greater than the sum of our parts. We want to have, the community work together and collaborate in the interest of Canadians. We want to facilitate situational awareness. We know many of our partners are producing monthly reports like Drug Analytical Services. We have Border Services generating reports. We have information that is of use to all partners spanning jurisdictions. And whenever possible, we like to share that. So for example, when there's a novel psychoactive substance identified in Canada, through our network, we're actually getting information coming from Europe, coming from the US, coming from all of those partners to say, yes, and here's some information that we have. This is what we've been seeing. And then we have something that we put a ton of effort behind, and that's the see something, say something. And I really do want to thank the Poison Centers. Over the last year, this has really come a long way, and we're in the process of formalizing that. But reporting things, if you see something, say something about it, and let the network know. We've been engaged in targeted health threat monitoring, so enhanced monitoring of threats that are occurring in other jurisdictions or things that we're aware of that could expand to say, if you see this, we need to know about it. We're going to connect that with the people that can take action. And then the last item is the, sort of the reach back support. And I'll tell a quick story before I turn it over to Deb. She's not shocked. I saw that smile, Deb. Basically, this is about a palitoxin exposure event that occurred. We had one of our poison centers reach out to us and say, look, we're looking for a specialist to support us. We need guidance for the remediation of a home. And we leveraged our domestic resources. We reached out to Canutech, and we looked at the approved contractors remediation list. And surprise, surprise, in this instance, we found something that Canada didn't have a great deal of expertise in. And of course, toxic coral, it's not overly surprising that Canada was somewhat challenged with that. So we reached out to our INTOX network, which is led by the World Health Organization. We've reached out to the Global Health Security Action Group and our international partners, and we had input coming from around the world to support that local response effort. We leveraged the Toxicovigilance Canada network to review and provide guidance on what should be provided. And then something happened because of this network, because of this collaboration. A couple of days after the response was over, we got contacted by Consumer and Hazardous and Product Safety Director to say, hey, could you put us in contact with the provincial and local resources? We want to have a conversation about, our regulations and the importation of coral. Is there something we could do here to prevent future exposures like this from happening through our regulatory processes? So, this is what it's all about, supporting those in need, providing access to the resources, collaborating, and taking action together. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Deborah Weiss.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about the Canadian Surveillance System for Poison Information. So as Richard just outlined for us, this is one of the components of Toxicovigilance Canada. And specifically, this is being developed to be a pan-Canadian surveillance system for poison center information with the goal of aggregating, analyzing, and interpreting poison center data in near real time. We will also be providing support to poison centers, health authorities, and partners through the generation of high quality, comparable surveillance data. As well, I want to highlight that we'll be embedding epidemiologists, Health Canada epidemiologists within each of the poison centers. And through this, we will be supporting Toxicovigilance Canada, and we will be fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange between multidisciplinary and multi-jurisdictional partners. So here is just a bit of an overview about poison centers in Canada. So there are 5 poison centers across Canada. They are all funded by the provinces. And poison centers are the 24/7 focal point to access treatment advice for drugs and poisons. And they provide services to healthcare professionals in all 13 provincial and territorial jurisdictions, as well as services directly to the Canadian public in 10 jurisdictions. And on average, Canadian poison centers process around 300,000 calls per year collectively. And about 70% of exposure calls from the public are managed remotely without the requirement for a physical interaction with a healthcare facility. And some of the exposures that are managed through poison centers include therapeutic and health products, consumer products, pesticides, controlled substances, environmental and occupational exposures, foodborne illness, as well as substances of concern for self-harm, criminal acts, and terrorism. And just to mention that these are just but a few of the exposures that are managed through poison centers. And I just wanted to mention as well that Dr. Margaret Thompson is participating today, as we heard off the top, and we can seek her input through the question and answer section on any questions you might have that pertain specifically to poison centers in Canada.
Cool. So hi, I'm Abdul Yassin, Deb's counterpart here within C-SPI, and what's up on the screen is a general framework for the detection and reporting of chemical incidences through C-SPI. It consists of three main outputs: the See Something, Say Something component, which is basically our pipe into the C-SPI community for them to report incidences to us. The orange box is a web scraping tool that we use to monitor media reports on chemical exposures, and then the blue box is data contributed from Canadian Poison Centers, which we are in the process of implementing automated and user-directed surveillance activities to basically mine that data. All three of these inputs basically feed into the C-SPI Tox team activities, which assesses, validates, and notifies the relevant authorities of these chemical incidences. So I'll briefly explain, the next slide, Rich. Yeah, I'll briefly explain the incidents report for cleaning products and disinfectants and how it went through this process. In March of 2020, basically at the start of the COVID pandemic, the C-SPI community through See Something, Say Something reported that they were seeing elevated levels of chemical exposures to cleaning products and disinfectants. Through that input, what we did was we basically pinged the Canadian Poison Centers to collect information on the number of calls that they received for cleaning products and disinfectants. We aggregated the results and analyzed the results compared to background baseline information and we quantified the increase in calls across that timeline and passed it on to our health portfolio programs for regulatory specialists to support in their risk assessment and risk management activities. These results produce, like I'll talk briefly about it, but these results basically helped in developing multiple public advisories, a voluntary stop sale, and amendments to policies for media engagement. So next, and it resulted in a publication that we put out in the Journal of Health Promotion and Chronic Disease Prevention to basically reach a wider audience there. Next slide, Rich. So yeah, on the screen is our contact information. If anyone else has more questions or wants to get involved. And the next slide is a more detailed list of toxicovigilance partners that are connected into the network. I'd also like to say that none of this work would be possible without the PCs for facilitating the collection of this data, and the CSPI community for bringing it forward. So yeah.
And with that, we'll turn it over to our Health Canada colleagues to talk about what they did with the data that came from the poison centers and how that was used. So I'll stop sharing, and James, will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Let's share the screen. Okay. Richard, can you just give me a thumbs up, or Abdul, if you can see my screen?
Yeah, you're good.
Outstanding. So, hello everyone, my name is James Hardy. I'm the manager of the Triage and Surveillance Division in Health Canada. Alors, premièrement, il faut que je dise que ma présentation aujourd'hui sera tout en anglais, mais je peux répondre aux questions en français s'il y en a. And so with that, we'll move along here. I'm going to talk a little bit about an overview of what the Consumer Product Safety Program is. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that Poison Center early warning information was. And then I'll wrap up talking about what our program's communication response was. So using this as a bit of example as to how our program was able to hear from Poison Centers, hear from Richard's group, and then turn that into some risk communications for our users, for all Canadians actually, in a relatively short time space. So first, quick overview of our program. Our program has as its mission to identify, assess, and manage health or safety risks associated with consumer products and cosmetics to Canadians. That's a lot of stuff. It's basically everything that isn't already a food, drug, pesticide. It's like your watch or the hardwood in your house or your shirt. And so we do that through a number of different ways. We have surveillance, that's kind of my job. We've got folks who do assessments. They do chemical assessments, engineering assessments, electronic assessments, lots of different specialists in many different domains. We've got risk managers. Those are the folks who write laws, who help write standards, who carry out compliance and enforcement projects. And we've got communication experts. Those are the folks that we collaborate with in our communication and public affairs branch, as well as people who are experts in risk communications. So a little bit about our program, a couple of interesting stats here for you. We administer the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act, the parts of the Food and Drug Act, and over 35 different regulations. There's a whole bunch of different regulations for things that catch fire, things that are poisonous, lots of different laws. We're about 100 staff in the National Capital Region, and we're supported by about 60 inspectors spread across Canada, mostly in metropolitan centers. We run about 15 enforcement projects a year where we look at different subsets of products that are risky. And we also receive incident reports from consumers and from industry members. It's one of the things that drives a lot of our machinery when someone tells us something happens. We get about 2,500 reports a year, and our C&E partners post around 300 different product recalls a year. So that gives you a pretty good sense as to who we are and what we're all about. So here, this is the really nice publication that Abdul was talking about earlier. This was published back in September, but I wanted to flag it here because it was way back in March, April, when the pandemic really first hit, when a lot of us started hearing about government lockdowns, that this stuff started coming up. And we got calls. I got a call from Richard, and he was hearing from some of his Poison Center partners that, hey, there seems to be something really interesting going on with calls about the use of bleaches, disinfectants, sanitizers, hand sanitizers, and that kind of thing. And we were like, oh, well, okay, well, what does it say? What does it mean? So here's a graph from that publication. And what I want to kind of put everyone's attention on is what's in this red circle. The dark gray here represents calls received in 2019, and the light gray represents calls received in 2020. And so you can see January, February, those are pretty analogous. But once you hit March, there's a huge uptick in the number, this is specific to bleaches, in the number of bleach calls that they got. And we were like, wow, okay, let's look into that. Let's characterize that. What's going on there? So we realized after talking to Richard, who talked to the Poison Center colleagues, these are a lot of adult exposures. And so in understanding the nature of those calls, our interpretation was like, it looks like Canadians are cleaning more often than not, using products perhaps they aren't familiar with, and they're not following the safety instructions on those products. And to us, that was like, okay, like, we know this space. You know, we administer what's called the Consumer Chemicals and Containers Regulations 2001, and that mandates certain label elements to appear in both official languages on chemical products like bleach. And it says things like, use in a well-ventilated space, wear gloves, don't wash your skin with this, things like that. And so what we saw here was a great opportunity to 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 get out to Canadians and to remind them how to use these products safely. So we worked with our communications and public affairs branch, and we said, hey, we've got actual real-time data coming in that's very, very recent and relevant, saying that there are risks that Canadians are experiencing at this time. Like I said, that publication happened back in September, but we were hearing about these events around the March, April timeframe. And so really quick early engagement was made internally. I was able to talk to some of our risk management experts and our communications experts, and they were quickly able to put together some of the messaging you kind of see on the website or on the presentation here. This turned into a bit of a communications approach. And not only were we able to pull that information together quickly, we were also able to share that through Richard to our Poison Center colleagues to say, hey, here's what we're going to say to try and prompt some action from Canadians to be a bit safer with these products. What do you guys think? And we were able to get some feedback and tweak that language a little bit to say, oh, yeah, we should change these wordings a little bit, or we could perhaps enhance the reach of these messages by working through those different partners and really having like a nice nationwide consistent approach on how people could use these different bleach products in a safer way. That was all good and well, but what was interesting here in the red circle, you see that March, April timeframe again. Later on, we kind of saw those numbers reduce. Now, there was no scientific study here to say that because of the messaging Health Canada did, those numbers went down. But it is interesting to note that we had a fairly intense and heavy communication strategy over the course of the summer of 2020. And through Richard and his team's careful monitoring of those numbers, and through the ongoing conversation we have with our Poison Center colleagues, we're able to see those numbers return to a bit more of a neutral state, or what we'd expect to see in 2019. Again, this is just one example. We actually recently put out an advisory using similar data to remind people, hey, don't mix your bleach with other chemical products, because that can actually cause some pretty harmful side effects as well. And again, that was driven by some of the numbers we saw that were coming up as a result of increased cleaning activities through COVID. So again, just a quick snapshot into how we use some of that information and how we can kind of quickly drive communications and remind Canadians to change behaviors, thanks to the very quick and early intervention flagged from our Poison Center colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, I'm going to share now the compliance and enforcement slides and turn it over to Mary Morgan.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, everyone, for giving us the time today. I mean, I think that we, in Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch, one of the many the silver linings of COVID is the establishment of a really good partnership with CSPI and the Poison Centers. I think we've been able to take the information that that you guys gather and the quick surveillance and do something where action is needed really quickly. And so really grateful to be here today and also to hear all the different perspectives from across, even within Health Canada. You can imagine that it's such a big department that we don't always get to hear about the good work of people like James. So that was really interesting. So thank you, James. Next slide, please, Richard. Sorry, I'm battling a bit of a cough these days, not COVID. I'm just this is a bit of an overview of our presentation today. So I'm gonna start by giving you a bit of kind of contextualizing where we sit in Health Canada as a compliance and enforcement branch, how we managed kind of the supply of hand sanitizers when the pandemic was declared, how we had to move quickly and work with our partners in pre-market to get things moving, but most importantly, to get access to safe product for Canadians. Our reactive and proactive strategies when dealing with unauthorized and non-compliant products, and how that was supported by our link and our partnership with CSPI. We're going to, I think Bobby is going to run through a couple of examples of how that collaboration resulted in quick and effective market action. And then what we look forward to in building a collaborative relationship and transforming our CME approach. I think one of the many things that we've learned throughout the pandemic is really using our partnerships and our intelligence to take quick action, but also what can we do from internally to transform our compliance and enforcement approach and really focus on those areas of highest risk. And I think that these kinds of networks really raise signals that are strong. You know, when you're seeing a little bit of red across the country, what does that mean? So next slide, please. So this is a organizational, I guess, chart you could say of our organization within regulatory operations and enforcement branch. You'll see that we have program clusters, horizontal services, and then we have service related activities. And so when James was referring to inspectors on the ground, that's kind of in the delivery clusters. A lot of our programs have strong ties with other branches. In health product compliance, we're specifically responsible for drugs, so prescription and over-the-counter, as well as natural health products. And so we work really closely with our partners in NNHPD. And so that's, you'll hear from Sean Lawless. And so we do work with a number of compliance and enforcement tools, having a complementary scientific program such as the lab to help verify signals, but also to confirm non-compliance. And so a number of activities include inspections, product sampling, compliance verification, compliance promotion, enforcement measures, and where necessary, investigations. So working kind of in the criminal investigation space when it comes to people who are, or entities who are deliberately breaking the law or deliberately doing things that cause risk to Canadians. And so our work also includes working with partners, stakeholders, Health Canada professionals, to ensure that Canadians are informed of the risks associated with, you know, the products that they're using, the products that they're taking, the products they're giving their children, and supporting, of course, regulatory and policy development, as well as risk assessments, and like I said, conducting enforcement actions. Next slide, please. So you'll see here that our directorate is across the entire country. Our headquarters is in Ottawa. Tufik is the manager of that headquarters team here in Ottawa. And then we have offices of inspectors across all the major metropolitan cities. Bobby specifically is the manager in our Toronto office, covering the Ontario region. And so the regions are broken up across the country, and we have managers sitting mostly in Burnaby, in Ontario, and one in Quebec, but they all have responsibilities within those regions. And so that's how we're able to take a nationally consistent approach when it comes to compliance and enforcement. Next slide, please. And you'll see here how we manage our compliance and enforcement efforts. So we strive to take action consistently across the country. You know, that's one of the reasons why our branch was created back in 2016, where we brought all inspection programs together and created a bit of a stronger, wider governance across the board. And so that, you know, if you're a company working in Ontario, Quebec, or BC, that you were treated in exactly the same way, regardless of where you were kind of sitting. You know, our principles really do remain the same across the board. And so we do take a risk-based approach to compliance and enforcement. You can also imagine that from a resource perspective, we can't touch everything or see everything or know everything. And so we really appreciate, like I said, the campaigns of see something, say something. Reminds me a little bit of travel when that was allowed, but you know, seeing those signs in the airport, but you know, understanding the intensity of signals and how we can take action that's proportional to the risk. When it comes to intensity and timeliness, that's very important from our perspective. Rather than playing a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, we're trying to address things at a national level. We want to also ensure an integrated approach to management of risk and benefits. So balancing the risk with access has always been something that's very important to us, to not cause harm, but also to not cause further adverse health effects, depending on ability to access certain products. And then finally, like I was mentioning earlier with the national program, we strive for predictable, uniform, and national approach to enforcement, so that, you know, across the country, we're seen as being consistent, but also treating people and companies and regulated parties, stakeholders, the same. I'm going to turn it over right now to Tufik and Bobby, who will walk you through a bit of our a case study and kind of what we did or had to kind of rallying our troops together to make sure that access was appropriate, but also safe to something important like hand sanitizers. So over to you, Tufik.
Thank you. Oh. One second. Okay, thank you, Mary. So everyone can hear me okay, I'm hoping. My name is Tufik Zayoun, Acting Manager of the Health Products Compliance and Enforcement Unit, as Mary stated, within the Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch. And today, I'm going to walk you through our sanitizer environment that we've been dealing with since the pandemic started, and our group's proactive and reactive approaches to dealing with those confirmed non-compliances. So as you are aware, hand sanitizers at the beginning of the pandemic were ultimately a rarity. They were worth their weight in gold due to supply issues with USP and food grade ethanol. A vast portion of the population was unable to access the products as a measure to counter the spread of COVID-19. The demand for USP and FCC grade ethanol worldwide led to very severe shortages here in Canada. So as a counter to that, the department looked at various options and strategies to ensure that Canadians had access to hand sanitizer supply. And the department achieved this by increasing domestic capacity and providing many flexibilities and interim measures to industry. And some of these flexibilities and measures included, for example, allowing products that were already authorized for sale in Canada, but not fully compliant with Health Canada requirements to be utilized as appropriate, allowing products that are not authorized for sale in Canada, but are authorized and registered in other foreign jurisdictions with similar regulatory frameworks to be brought into the country for Canadians to use. And also another example is by allowing other sources of ethanol to be used for sanitizer production. For example, I know our pre-market folks allowed for the use of technical grade ethanol from approved sources. Next slide, please. So as soon as the flexibilities and the measures were put in place, there was an influx of new players, industry partners onto the market. So these stakeholders were importing manufacturing sanitizers at an extremely quick rate to stabilize the Canadian supply chain. So with this flux and increased media scrutiny of the hand sanitizer supply chain in Canada, as you can imagine, we received a wave of compliance-related complaints related to hand sanitizers for us to assess and address as appropriate. So Canadians, what we found, what we felt was the Canadians now had supply, but they wanted to know that the sanitizers they were using were authorized and or approved by our department. So my group specifically is responsible for receiving and triaging all of the online complaints from the public, from industry partners, from sister partners such as CSPI, and internal partners, from various programs within HC related to these cases for triage. Priority assignment and routing to the regions for compliance verification action. Oh, sorry, previous slide, please. Yeah. Related to trends on the overall complaints, we found that the majority of complaints received related to the sale and use of unlicensed, unauthorized products, the use of unauthorized technical grade ethanol sources that were not approved by our pre-market partners, products that were missing key risk statements. For example, there were requirements. So if you were using technical grade ethanol because it wasn't USP or FCC grade ethanol, that you would be required to have specific risk statements on the bottle to reflect that. As well as we found a lot of complaints and referrals related to the use of other forms of alcohol that were not approved and authorized, such as the use of methanol, which is extremely dangerous, and industrial alcohol as well. And we also received a small amount of complaints related to the use of specific denaturants that were not acceptable and or medicinal ingredients. Next slide, please. So we have our reactive and proactive approaches to dealing with these issues, and we're predominantly, we try to kind of keep a balance between both, but we're predominantly a reactive group, a reactive organization. So in response to many of these complaints, the Health Products Compliance and Enforcement Unit, my group, prioritized and opened over 800 hand sanitizer related cases and complaints, or assessed from various sources. And as I stated previously, these were from media scans, some from CSPI, from internal partners, public complaints, provincial territorial complaints and partners. People wanted to make sure that their product was safe and that it was effective and that it was approved by us. So our group worked with our program partners to, either when we did receive and validate those complaints, to validate the actual risk and confirm that risk. And then we assigned it to our regional folks, so Bobby in the central region, for compliance verification action. When non-compliances are confirmed, and I'd like to emphasize that there aren't always non-compliances associated with referrals that are made to us, but when they are confirmed and when they're transferred over to the region for action, various compliance and enforcement measures are available to address these, which include using compliance letters to communicate with the companies, conducting on-site visits, even during a pandemic. As much as we try to be as safe as possible in a virtual environment, and we were effective and efficient in a virtual environment, we did have cases in special circumstances where we did on-site visits. We issued stop sales, seizures. Our pre-market partners worked with us to issue license suspensions as required. We also published and implemented recalls and public communications related to those non-compliances. An example for hand sanitizers of a key public communication that we posted was the one that is available on our recall and safety alert database. That is, it's a list and a risk communication related to the recall of certain hand sanitizers that may pose health risks. The intent of this advisory is to provide regular updates to inform Canadians on the associated risks and advise on what they should do if they encounter such products. To date, I believe we have about 147 entries of products on that table. And again, you can find that at the Recall and Safety Alert database located on the Health Canada website, and we'll provide that link at the end. Finally, I'd like to emphasize that we do leverage our reactive data. I mean, this is a lot of great information that we get resulting from our work in order to inform our compliance promotion and compliance monitoring initiatives. For compliance monitoring, our group leverages trends of non-compliance to determine if long-term mitigation measures should be implemented. For promotional initiatives, we assess key compliance and enforcement areas where we show trends where we think that industry may need a little bit of extra guidance to help them along. To date, for hand sanitizers, I'd like to just state that we are currently in the planning phase, close to actually implementing a compliance monitoring project for our site to sample products across the country in order to validate specific criteria. For example, alcohol type, packaging, bilingual labeling. And we do this to ensure that our compliance promotion strategies are working and if they need to be tweaked for industry. Next slide, please. So through most of the activity, though most of the activities are reactive in nature, we also leverage proactive approaches, especially on key issues. So one of these being our online monitoring, and our program to date has conducted ongoing monitoring of unauthorized claims related to COVID-19 and hand sanitizers on 12 major online retailer sites. Some of these include Amazon, Bing, Craigslist, eBay, Facebook, Instagram, Kijiji, etc. Not only have we conducted monitoring activities on those online sites, we have developed collaborative relationships with these companies to ensure that we are all working together to address the same goals, which is to keep unauthorized products off of their websites. That's our primary goal. And it's been a great relationship to build with these major companies and in this global fight that we're all in together. In addition to our current work, various internal partners, such as our advertising group in the Marketed Health Products Directorate and Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate, dedicated resources to doing web scanning, proactive web scanning to identify advertising-related non-compliances related to these products, and general non-compliances related to the sale of these products. These referrals were sent to our group for action and as deemed appropriate. And it was all proactively driven. So building relationship with our partners, I really want to emphasize that we've built throughout this pandemic very strong relationships with our partners within Health Canada, whether that be, as I mentioned, the advertising groups, our relationship with our pre-market partners, with the Competition Bureau. But one, that is new that I'm very, I'm very excited about kind of seeing where it goes is the relationship with CSPI. They have been fantastic throughout some of the work, and we'll provide a couple of examples. But they've been fantastic to work with, and they have really provided us another insight into the world of poison control and how we could potentially leverage this information to assist us in our compliance verification activities. Finally, proactively communicating when we try to mitigate potential risks is really important. For example, we work with our program partners to develop advisories when we see kind of trending kind of approaching on certain non-compliances. One where we were proactive was one where was related to hand sanitizers and children. The advisory is specifically called Hand Sanitizers and Children's Safety, What Parents and Guardians Need to Know. It's available on our Health Canada website. And this is a proactive piece that was driven by some of the poison information that we had received from our sister partners related to incidents that have been taking place across the country. And we felt like we needed to get ahead of it before the school started, and we had posted a public advisory in late August, I believe early September, informing parents of the potential risks. So that's another avenue that we're hoping to kind of leverage a little bit more of and work with our sister partners and our internal partners to ensure that Canadians have the right information at the appropriate time. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Bobby Chu, who will walk you through a couple of examples in our proposed path forward on these on this work.
Thanks, Tufik. So I just want to go through a couple of examples and a couple of cases that we've been through in the pandemic, specifically with hand sanitizers. As Tufik mentioned, this first case is about hand sanitizers and food pouches. And so I just want to highlight a couple of things from these examples. One is our approaches to non-compliance, and also secondly, our collaborations leading to successful outcomes with industry partners and also with the poison centers specifically as well. So this particular case, the first one about the food pouches, poison center reported accidental ingestion of these hand sanitizers and triggering opening of a case in our region. And it was due to hand sanitizers packaged in pouches with labeling that appears to appeal to children. So what happened was, after we opened a case, we definitely had to take a priority action in terms of engaging and collaborating with the distributors of those products in the industry to mitigate health risks. And that led to quickly led to stop sale of the products on the market. But further to that, further discussions with the company involved, it resulted in voluntary withdrawal of the product from the market completely. Not only of the particular brands or particular types of products they were selling, but all across their product lines, they've decided to voluntarily withdraw of the product. So we see that there's a collaboration with the industry of when they are notified of the risk, and after their own analysis and our negotiation with them, we were able to provide a path for them to withdraw the products or removing those products from the market. And as Tufik mentioned at the end of his presentation, he talked about a communication, and that's on the slide, at the bottom of the slide, a specific communication about hand sanitizers and children's safety, more explicit instructions and information provided to parents and guardians, adults, through our public communication. So that brought about a successful outcome for this first case. Next slide, please. The second example is with the methanol poisoning, also from the hand sanitizers. Now, methanol is not allowed to be used in hand sanitizers, but in this particular case, there was traces or methanol inside the product. And it is also reported to us through, not through the poison center this time, but through the public health unit. So another partner that helps us and reported a lot of good information to us and allow us to take quick action. So the public health unit reported ingestion of hand sanitizers leading to methanol poisoning. And the health unit was instrumental in identifying the retailer in that particular community that sold the product in question and sent the product for testing. Through collaboration with the public health unit, we were able to obtain samples from those retailers and also additional information from sales that allowed quick risk mitigation. First, asking the retailer to stop selling the product, and also further digging into who is actually the distributors of these products on the market. Our team was able to find out the distributor and ultimately the market authorization holder, meaning the registrant of the product with Health Canada, and the company stopped the sale of the product, and subsequently also led to the actual recall of the product itself because of the concerns that we have for the product containing methanol, which it shouldn't have. And we also, besides recalling the product, we also conducted a physical inspection on site of the company. And we also identified additional inventory that was available for sale at those sites, and which led to seizures of the products and prevent further distribution. The pandemic, even though it's challenging, but we're still out there conducting inspections, especially in situations that are considered high risk, such as this one. We're not going out as frequently during the pandemic, but in terms of our approach in conducting inspections, on-site inspections, we conduct risk assessments on when we have to conduct these on-site activities to ensure the safety of not only our own inspectors, but also the safety of the people that we might encounter or meet during these inspections. Through the inspection of the company, we found additional, we were requesting and getting additional quality information, but ultimately we found that there were additional deficiencies in the quality information and the quality systems that were put in place by the firm. And we requested the company to actually recall all of their brands of hand sanitizers that were distributed. So it expanded the recall from one product to one brand name of product to several different brands that the same company was marketing. The public health unit also provided updates to us on the patient status because there was the poisoning, and we're glad to receive information and updates to hear that the patients have all been released from hospitals. But these are a couple of examples that shows through information from either the poison centers or our health partners that we're able to take additional actions to prevent further injuries to the public. Next slide, please. So our path forward, and we really stress that the partnerships are very important to us. Health and safety information comes from a variety of different sources. The two cases demonstrated from two different places, but there are way many more that we receive on a regular basis, if not a daily basis. Just through this opportunity today, being able to participate on this webinar, we have established a lot of new links and new partnerships. And just because of that, just this past week, it helped us in facilitating exchanging information for another product issue that we encounter. So we're really thankful to continuing to build new partnerships and building strategies in terms of how we can exchange information and help each other proactively in terms of preventing health issues. It is still in the early stages, but we have strong interest to connect with other stakeholders and developing strategies for risk management. And we welcome stakeholders to connect with us to explore other opportunities, both not only domestically, but both domestically and internationally. Next slide, please. So this is a slide with contact information for us, with us, and an email, and then several links below that might be of interest. One of the link below our email address is the Recall and Safety Alert database, which Tufik alluded to, where we have all the recall information listed, and also any warnings, advisories, or information updates that are posted online, then you can find it in that database. Also below that, there is the health product complaint form. And it is the main way where we prefer to receive product complaint information, specifically for drugs and natural health products. And the good thing about this form is it automatically relay the information to Tufik's team, where it is goes right into processing, and then regionally they will go to either the central region for us in Ontario, or in the east region or west region for action when necessary. And many healthcare professionals and consumers are already using this form to inform us of possible health and safety risk or quality issues related to drugs and natural health products. On the other side, a couple of other links that may be of interest are different programs have different complaint forms that consumers or healthcare professionals can fill out and complete to report issues. One is for cannabis, and the other is for medical devices. And I would like to pass the time back to Tufik for a few words.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bobby. And thank you everyone for your time today. I really do want to reiterate the criticality of continuing to collaborate with our various partners. I think it's really important, and I know we're already in discussions and with Richard and his team to kind of continue those discussions, and we're very excited to see where they go. I think the ultimate goal is to see how we could leverage each other's work in order to even further protect the health and safety of Canadians. And I think we both have that passion and that end goal, and meetings are being planned to be scheduled to continue that discussion to see what we can do from that perspective. But thank you again, and I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague from the Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate, Sean Lawless, who's going to walk you through their perspective as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tofik and team. I'm just going to load that presentation now for you, Sean.
Thanks,
just as a sidebar, that second case, the methanol related one, an appreciation to the partners at the Regulatory Operations Enforcement Branch who shared that information across the CSPI and Toxicovigilance Canada community, so we could do that enhanced monitoring for potential additional cases. So just the two-way communication and how important that is. And Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Richard. And thanks, everyone, for participating today and listening to us and what we've been able to accomplish over the last year now, just about with all the different work that's going on to really ensure the health and safety of Canadians. So we'll go through my presentation here. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'll give a general overview of the context and key drivers of a policy implementation that we made to help ensure the health and safety of Canadians. So what was the objective? What were the drivers, consultation on that new policy, and the key considerations, and then where did we finally end up? So we'll move on to the next slide. So thanks very much to Mary and Tufik and Bobby for help setting up and providing a lot of the context regarding the pandemic and the high demand for hand sanitizer and the raw materials, so alcohol, whether it be ethanol alcohol or technical grade ethanol, with regards to hand sanitizers. So we saw a big kind of spike in that demand. Since the onset of the pandemic, we've received over 5,000 plus applications to produce new hand sanitizers coming from thousands of different companies across the country. So really a strong response from the Canadian industry to help provide products that can be helpful and effective against combating the pandemic. But with that came some challenges as well. So what we saw with that high demand is that materials for packaging and labeling became in scarce shortage. Through the spring and summer, these shortages in packaging became evident, and we started seeing a lot of products coming through and being packaged in food and beverage containers. So we've seen a lot of things like the image here that we have on the presentation. And essentially these kind of things, we saw also wine bottles, beer and soda cans, even things such as, silly as it might sound, hand sanitizers packaged in vaping cartridges. So these kind of things are of great concern to us because we started to see, as a result of the strong work from the poison centers and the surveillance unit, helping to provide that signal, just as James had shown in his presentation, that there was a large spike in increase in incidental ingestions of hand sanitizers. So next slide, please. So we got that risk signal received, and we saw what was going on. So that high increase in number of ingestions, and what that really amounted to. So we kind of had something on our plates that basically said, what can we do about this? Like, this is a problem, and how can we do this from a regulatory perspective, or introducing something that could help ensure the safety of Canadians and mitigate these risks that are potentially out there by this increase in use of these type of products. Unfortunately, our regulations don't prescribe the type of containers that can be used, or the labeling format. And so we really wanted to come up with a way to handle this problem and kind of introduce something in the form of a policy to help guide industry and our industry partners, and also kind of the general public into what to look for and what to expect. So we leveraged our partnerships with Richard and his team to really kind of talk with the poison centers and get some increased metrics and data on where we were seeing these increase in number of incidents. And this is really kind of data to drive the kind of approach that we would like to have taken, or we did take, with this new policy. And what we found was that the large majority of ingestions were in school-aged children, 0 to 5 years. So that's of obviously great concern to us, and we needed to find measures to help combat that aspect of things on that side when we introduce a new policy. So we'll go to the next slide. So the goal of, before I get to that, so our regulatory context is, as we mentioned before and was mentioned by my other colleagues, we regulate the natural health products in the Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate, and they're covered under the Natural Health Product Regulations. Currently, under the context, these alcohol-based hand sanitizers have warning and labeling requirements, such as you see here, for external use only, keep out of reach of children, things like that, and if swallowed, call a poison control center. But what the regulations don't do is prescribe how that information has to appear on the label. So most people would see that, those warning statements are probably in small text on the back of a package, not readily evident or available for someone to see or look at to provide an appropriate warning for those things. And beyond that, the context of these products being packaged in beverage containers really can be quite confusing sometimes to some people, and an automatic response might cause someone to drink from a water bottle and have an incidental ingestion incident and really not know that it was a hand sanitizer in that product. So we'll move to the next slide. So our goal was to minimize that intentional ingestion. And based on the data we received, the focus was on additional packaging and labeling requirements. So initially it thought about labeling requirements, but then having the data to show us that the majority of incidents were in school-aged children. The children can't necessarily read yet. While a stop sign might be helpful, again, it's not the be all and end all. So what we really wanted to do is focus on adding and having other measures. We also did use this information to kind of explore other options, such as denaturants, and adding and requiring the addition of denaturants to these products, but those are not without their own inherent risk. So there was a lot of impacted groups, stakeholders, manufacturers, packagers, labelers, importers, as well as the Canadian public and the consumer that are using these products. Next slide, please. So we developed a policy throughout the summer with feedback from a large number of different stakeholder groups. And we put the policy out for consultation in August to September. Our policy focused on two major things, and there was support from all the groups. So having a proper closure, such as a pump or dispensing cap on these products that are packaged in beverage or bottle containers, and as well a front of the pack warning with a red octagon or a stop sign that says "Do not drink the pub wall." There was no anticipated impact. We had consulted heavily with the various groups, so the poison control centers, heavily with front of pack labeling experts, the Mental Health Commission of Canada, the Canadian Association of Liquor Jurisdictions, Canadian Consumer Specialty Products, l'Association pour le développement de l'innovation en chimie au Québec, Responsible Distribution Canada, Retail Council of Canada, the Institute for Safe Medicine Practices Canada, and our various other associations for natural health products and consumer health products. So we wanted to take a really collaborative approach on this and kind of find a solution that could be implemented and would actually make an impact and have a difference. Next slide, please, Richard. So basically, just kind of reiterating the key considerations for these things. So children versus adults in terms of where the incidental ingestions were occurring. Using number one, first and foremost, an appropriate closure. So kind of through the policy mandating that there is a proper closure that needs to be used on these products if they're going to be packaged in a water bottle or a wine bottle or what have you. And as well in terms of that, the use of a graphic or a symbol, so a stop sign. And we wanted to have a principled approach on that. So we wanted to have clear, concise wording, a targeted message, presented on the top half in the front of a package or the front of a bottle, and then consistency with other regulated products that are of the same thing. So you'll see similar type of warning statements for packaging on other risky or hazardous products. And then, as well as was highlighted in the previous presentation, strongly recommending against marketing to children and complement that public advisory there. So making sure that parents and guardians are aware, keep these products out of reach of children. Do not kind of have them sitting lying around, especially if they're in a container that could be misconstrued as a water bottle. And we'll move to the next slide just to kind of wrap it up to see kind of what the end result would look like. So we published the policy finally on October 2nd after that consultation and putting things into place. And so there's a link there to that policy. And so we were expecting that these measures be implemented. We're aware that there was still a shortage of these products and we did want to keep product on the market. So to unfairly recall products immediately and take everything off the shelves that is packaged that way could cause another problem on its own. So most companies were voluntarily either changing their packaging and adding these labeling statements and these caps right away. But the end result is if there was still a shortage and cannot use a proper package or a proper bottle with a pump, that they would be forced to use these pumps and a product would look similar to this that we have up on the screen. And so currently right now we're continuing to do ongoing monitoring of the impact and looking at those numbers of incidental ingestions and seeing how that's impacted the products that are on the market, and hopefully will have a strong impact on the number of incidents being reported in terms of incidental ingestion of hand sanitizers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean, and we'll turn it over to Pam Facelli and team.
Great, thank you, everyone. That was a lot of information, and I will remind folks as I'm sharing my screen that we are recording this. So if there's anything that you need to go back to, you will be able to review that information. So I am just going to share my screen here. Hopefully this works. So I'm going to run through the role of the public outreach and communications working group that has been referenced by previous speakers, and then pass it over to my colleague Patty Stark to wrap it up, and we will get into the questions that you have. So early in the 1980s, poison centers across Canada have promoted Poison Prevention Week. And in 2018, there was a recognition of the value of collaborating on common messaging. And so it sparked interest really in further collaborating on that on public outreach, and led to the creation of the Public Outreach Communications Working Group of Toxicovigilance Canada. So the scope of this group is really to provide a forum for discussion, that knowledge translation and exchange among the stakeholder groups for the purposes of getting more cohesive, harmonized messaging around poison related issues facing Canadians today. And we've heard a couple of those issues throughout this webinar. Our objectives really are to identify themes for Poison Prevention Week, develop a comprehensive communication plan to respond to those emerging issues like hand sanitizer and cleaning products that we've seen over the past year, and to build capacity within the group, the public outreach communications group, to interact with media. There are different levels of that work going on amongst the members. We also wanted to develop a year-long communication plan that highlights seasonal topics and messaging that is applicable across the year, over the year, regardless of what season we're in or what emerging issue that we are facing. And to provide a knowledge exchange forum for discussion for stakeholders, and of course, as part of Toxicovigilance Canada, champion that work. The composition of the Public Outreach and Communications Committee is composed of poison centers, you won't be surprised, government agencies, as well as injury prevention focused organizations. And these folks are recognized as experts in their field. And we work to really leverage the scope and breadth of the expertise of the individuals and the agencies, their teams that they have for the dissemination of reliable, credible information to Canadians. So I'll run through quickly who the members are. So these are the 5 poison centers that are part of the committee. We also have a number of departments and directorates from Health Canada. Parachute is on this committee, as well as the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. We have provincial injury prevention centers like the Injury Prevention Center in Alberta, in BC, the Child Safety Link that is in Nova Scotia and works very closely with the IWK Poison Center, and Saskatchewan's Prevention Institute. Beyond these immediate members, we also have a network of additional stakeholders that we each reach out to. And here is a list of some of the key ones: the Canadian Collaborating Centers for Injury Prevention, the Canadian Pediatric Society, Trauma Association, StatsCan, TSSA, and the Canadian Standards Association.
Sorry, Pam, it's Patty. Your slides aren't moving.
Oh. That is bizarre. Let me stop sharing for a minute. Does that work better?
Nope, not seeing them at all now.
Your screen's not shared right now, Pam. You just share your screen back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to switch to something else here. Sorry about that. Can you see them now?
Yes.
Are you able to see that?
Yes, Pam.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so let me just go back quickly, and I'll go. So I won't bore you with all the text, but I will show you the logos for the members that are part of the Public Outreach and Communications Committee, the various Health Canada departments and directorates. This is the national organizations, the Institute for Safe Medication Practices and Parachute, the provincial level agencies that are involved, the injury prevention centers in various provinces, as I said. And this, I guess, is a slide where I got to in terms of the network that we also reach out to. So very key people who are involved in poison prevention. Just before I hand it over to Patty, Poison Prevention Week is coming up in March. I know time flies, and March is just around the corner. So it runs this year from the 21st to the 27th, and the theme that we as the committee have chosen is poison prevention. It's in your hands. And really the idea was to empower people to take action, to act on the key messages. And so we're promoting the Check for Poisons, and there are a number of hashtags that we can share out with the group that the entire committee is going to be using, and looking for some local and provincial activation of this. So you can certainly check out our website or any of the members' websites for their activities on Poison Prevention Week. So I'm going to pass it over to Patty now to give us a bit, a look at what implementation right on the ground looks like.
Thanks, Pam. So I just wanted to share a bit about what we did with the information that was shared by all of our great partners at Health Canada and Consumer Product Safety as we were dealing with issues around COVID and hand sanitizers and cleaners at the beginning of the pandemic. So with the information, the alerts and advisories that were provided, as well as the social media, we shared those on our social media posts. We also shared all of the content with 450 members of our online injury prevention community, and also with about, well, over 60 community partners that we've worked with in the past regarding Poison Prevention Week. So we've been working on Poison Prevention Week at a provincial level for a number of years now. And so there's quite a group or network of people who have been interested in promoting that through the work they do in communities. It was also shared with our partners at Alberta Health Services. Then the other thing that happened is we received a number of requests for presentations to family resource networks, as well as the Alberta Home Visitation Network. So it was an opportunity to share that information and actually have some dialogue. So the kinds of things we heard at those presentations were things like people being very surprised. There's sort of a sense, I think, that the sanitizers and disinfectants and all those products we have in our homes are fairly innocuous, which we know is not the case. So it was a really good opportunity to talk about that these products can be dangerous and the things we need to do to handle them properly to keep ourselves safe. The other thing was that people don't read labels. So again, that sort of forgetting about the nature of the products we're using, and certainly around hand sanitizers, we had lots of conversations about, now that we're using a technical grade of ethanol, that there are some concerns with whether this is an appropriate product to use for everybody, and that it's really important to supervise children, older adults who may not be aware of the dangers of the product as well. So unfortunately, one of our ongoing challenges in injury prevention is that we disseminate a lot of good messaging, and our ability to determine whether it is landing to the people that we'd like to change their behavior. So that link is a little bit of a challenge for us. And so evaluating the effect of this messaging is often a challenge. So we continue to work at that. And that's all I have, Pam. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Patty. My apologies to everyone for the slide glitch on mine. We will share those with all the participants. I'm going to hand it over now to Stephanie, who's been monitoring the questions that have been coming in throughout the presentation. And hopefully we can get to a couple.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, we'll definitely have time for a couple of questions. So one of the questions is, my experience is that poison centers are like many health professionals. They see what needs to be done to address a risk. They're the first ones to see that. What outreach has been done to the Minister of Health to draw attention to this essential surveillance service?
Would you like me to start? I'm not sure if you're targeting them or. Okay. All right. So it's a great question, and I think internationally, the knowledge of poison centers, that they're there, and the value that they contribute is not widely recognized. And even here domestically, look at that Ipsos survey it was focused on sort of cannabis, and only 40% of Canadian parents knew of the sort of the existence of the poison center and when to call it. So we've been working on developing the Canadian surveillance system for poison information going back to 2013. And to do that, we had to develop a business case and support all the rationale as to why it was required, what were the resource requirements, and it went all the way up to the Deputy Minister of Health Canada, with roughly half of the resources that are coming to our program going directly to the poison centers. So, this is a deputy minister priority file, and a fair bit of, I would assume, a fair bit of communication on that front would be going between, sort of our deputy and the minister. And other work that's underway with respect to sort of establishing a toll-free number. These are things that are being briefed up to the Minister of Health to explain the importance of the importance of the poison centers and the collaboration of the Toxicovigilance Canada network.
Thanks, Richard. Is there anyone else that wants to add to that question at all? Nobody jumping on the train. Okay. Another question. There were a few things mentioned in the presentation. Richard, you talked about the Toxicovigilance Canada network. You and your colleagues talked about reporting, the See Something, Say Something. Pam, you and Patty talked about outreach and communications. So for those who maybe aren't connected or aware of these different opportunities, what are things people participating on this webinar should know about how they could get involved themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Pam, you go first.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, so I was going to say in the intro presentation, there was an email address for the Toxicovigilance Canada generic email account. Sending an email to us and sort of explaining your background and how you could contribute to Toxicovigilance Canada. And essentially, what we would do is go in and send you an invitation to join. Our goal is to facilitate collaboration and partnership. So if you're somebody who can make a difference in poison prevention, treatment, and harm reduction, reach out and we'd be happy to let you join the network.
And I would just add to that I think there's different levels of involvement that folks may want. That's a great idea, Richard. Connecting with Parachute, with any of the injury prevention centers that are listed, that I listed or will be listed when you get my slides. Those are the folks that we're doing the implementation pieces that may be, those activities may be something that you want to get involved with. So I think there's a couple of ways that people can get involved.
Excellent, thank you. The other question we have is just about if it's possible to get a copy of some of the slides and potentially contact information from the various speakers. So Parachute on our part, we'll connect with the different speakers we have today and we'll follow up with some of that information as we have an update. So thanks everyone for your questions.
Great, thanks, Steph. So we are wrapping up with 1 minute left. So that is wonderful. We're on time. Just to remind everyone who is a participant, if you can stick around for a minute to answer a short evaluation that we have about the webinar, please do so. At this point, I want to thank all of our speakers today. It was a fantastic presentation, tons and tons of great information. And I think it's systems and activities like this that that go on that not everyone knows about. So I think it was a great opportunity for people to learn all of the wonderful work that's being done across the board at Health Canada, across the poison centers, who are so invaluable to the work that we do, and the keeping emerging issues like this on the front burner for all of us, to make sure that information gets out to Canadians. So I will wrap this up for everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend coming. As I said, stick around for a few minutes on the evaluation piece. And thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.